A large portion of the Jewish nation has returned to its homeland, but the heart, soul, and mind of much of the Jewish nation are still in exile mode. This state of affairs must and will inevitably change. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
Prayer is a religious obligation. What is a person to do if he or she is unable to concentrate and focus?
This concept was discussed by the Chachamim. We find in the Mishnah the opinion of Rabban Gamliel that a person must always pray the full 18 barachot of the Shmoneh Esrei of the Tefillah, which in other words the long version of the Tefillah as we know it. And we have the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua, who says that a person may also pray a shorter version, a condensed version thereof. And the halakha is according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that if one is able, one prays the long version, and if one is unable to do so, then one prays the short version. That's in general terms. But we have to be more specific and explain what we mean by able and unable, etc. So let us begin at the beginning. The first thing to know about tefillah, about prayer, is that tefillah without kavanat halev, prayer without focusing of the mind and pure intention and focus of the heart, such a tefillah is not a tefillah. En tefillatho tefillah, in the words of the Chachamim. Such a prayer is not considered a prayer. Even more so, the Chachamim stated that a person who is clearly unable to focus and concentrate on the tefillah at all, whose mental, emotional or medical state condition is such that he or she is unable to concentrate on the tefillah in any significant way, such a person is of course exempt from the tefillah, and in fact such a person is not allowed to pray. And I will quote to you a statement from the Rambam just to clarify this point. Rambam discusses the essential requirements for tefillah in Ilchot Tefillah Perek Dal, the 4th chapter of the laws of tefillah, and the last of those 5 things that he lists as being essential for tefillah is kavanat halev, the ability to focus and concentrate and truly be in that place of connecting to Hashem and speaking to Hashem from the heart. Rambam goes on to explain in Halakha Tethwa, he says, kavanat halev kesav. What do we mean by having intention? What do we mean by the most basic level of intention that is required for tefillah? Kol tefillah she'enat b'chavanah, any tefillah that a person prays without any kavanah at all. In other words, a person just mumbles the words by rote, stands there, mumbles the words, walks backwards, forwards, etc., that goes through the motions, but is not really there at all. Einat tefillah, such a tefillah is not of any value whatever. If a person prayed such a tefillah without any kavanat halev, without any real connection to what he's saying, hozer umitpalel b'chavanah, he is required to repeat that tefillah, to daven once more. Nasa da'atho meshubeshet v'libo tarud. If a person is aware of the fact that his mind and his heart are at this moment not able to focus on the tefillah at all. In other words, we're talking about a person who's very, very distracted or very upset, or whose mind is in such a state that he's unable to devote his mind and his heart to tefillah in any meaningful way. Such a person is not allowed to pray, says the Rambam, until he returns to a state in which he is capable of tefillah, of praying to Hashem. This is based on a number of sources in Chazal. One of them is in the Talmud Bavli, Eruvin Daf Samech He. The Rambam continues and says, Lefichach haba min haderech. If a person, for instance, returns home after a journey, uhu ayef, and he's very tired, is exhausted, or mesir, or he's suffering, or in some way negatively affected by this journey, and therefore at this moment he's not really able to pray, אסור לו להתפלל עד שתתיישב דעתו. He is not required to pray, and he's not allowed to pray, in fact, until his mind, his body, his soul, all different parts of him, the different aspects of a human being, return to a state which allows a person to pray to Hashem. Amaru Hachamim, and the Rambam goes on to quote another statement in the Gemara over there in Eruvin, Shelosha yamim ad sheyanuach v'titkarer da'ato v'achar kach yitpalel. If a person, for example, came back from a journey or from some other strenuous or disruptive experience, or some event that upset him very greatly, whatever it might be, such that a person was unable to pray for a time, and it takes quite a time for him to return to a more normal state of mind, even if it takes 3 days, say Chazal, and the Rambam quotes it as we just read, the person is not to pray even for 3 days. In other words, the first thing to understand about tefillah, the requirement to pray to Hashem, to connect with Hashem on a daily basis, is that it can only be done, it is a chovah, it is a requirement, but it can only be done if a person is really there, if a person's mind and heart are in it. And yes, it's not always easy. One has to therefore prepare for tefillah, one therefore has to come to shul, or wherever one is going to pray, one has to prepare for that tefillah, one has to get to the shul or to where one is praying early, give oneself time to calm down, to calm one's mind, perhaps to study some Torah or read some Tehillim, or many different activities, or meditate, or what have you, or just sit still for a short period of time to calm oneself and place oneself in the right mood and frame of mind in order to pray. All these things have to be done on a regular daily basis, because to pray seriously is not always such a simple matter for everybody, and it is one of the things that Chazal listed as requiring hizuk, things that require special attention so that we will succeed in doing them properly. But if a person is in such a state of mind due to something that occurred, and he is not able to pray in a serious manner to Hashem now at all, he is not allowed to pray, and he shouldn't feel that he has to pray without kavanah. It is quite wrong to think so, and that is a common mistake, and it's important therefore to stress this point.
What if a person can in fact concentrate, but he or she is nevertheless distracted or in a rush?
This too is discussed by the Chachamim quite explicitly, and here we're discussing another level of concentration or lack of focus. In the first case, we spoke of someone who truly cannot focus, can truly not pray at all in any significant, meaningful way, and really to try and do so would be a farce, and therefore it is asur, it is prohibited to do so. Your question is about someone who is able to pray, perhaps not with the fullest intention, the fullest kavanat halev that one would want, maybe not the best tefillah that he's ever prayed, but he's able to concentrate, but on the other hand, he is very distracted, or alternately, he's in a great rush for whatever reason. He might be late for work, late for an appointment, what have you. It also goes without saying, another situation might be where a person is not feeling the best physically, for example. He may be a little bit ill, not very, very seriously ill, but somewhat ill, and therefore not at his best, and therefore not able to focus as he would usually do. In such a case, the Chachamim said that a person may certainly pray a shortened version of the tefillah, and this shortened version is known as Havinenu. This tefillah of Havinenu works in the following manner. A person says the first 3 berachot of the Shmoneh Esrei, the first 3 of the 18 blessings of the usual standard tefillah, and the last 3 at the end, and in the middle, instead of the intermediate 12 berachot, there is one beracha which ends with Baruch Atah Hashem Shomea Tefillah, where the person mentions all the different aspects of our requirements, our individual requirements, and Am Yisrael's requirements and requests of Hashem. All the different berachot in between the first 3 and the last 3 of the berachot are mentioned in a condensed form, and we end with Shomea Tefillah. So in the end we have actually 7 berachot and not 18. This is called Havinenu. This tefillah appears in both the Talmud Bavli and the Talmud Yerushalmi in slightly different versions. It's interesting to note that in some ways the version of the Talmud Yerushalmi seems to be more straightforward and easier even to understand than the version of the Bavli, but in truth, both are quite straightforward, very brief and succinct, and certainly it is more likely that a person who's in a big rush, or who's not feeling his best, or a person who is very distracted but nevertheless knows he has to pray and is able to and wants to pray, it is more likely that the person will be able to do so successfully if he prays Havinenu, and this is exactly the purpose of such a tefillah. And let me quote to you again from the Rambam. Here in Perek Sheni, the second chapter of Yichot Tefillah, the Rambam writes that normally a person prays the entire tefillah, as we know, but b'shemasa da'atho mechueneth u'l'shanot tamahel likroth, then this is a situation where a person finds himself capable and at ease and fully willing and able to pray the usual tefillah, so he does. Aval im hayat tarud with a hook, or shekasara l'shano, if a person is tarud means distracted. Dahuk means that he is under pressure, he is in a rush, and things of this nature. Or shekasara l'shano, or another possibility is that the person is unfamiliar with the long version of the tefillah. Mitpalel shalosh rishanot uvracha ahat me'en kol ha'imsayot, he prays the first 3 brachot and 1 bracha. Instead of all the 12 intermediate brachot, he prays 1 bracha in the middle. And with this he ends his chovah. So we see that the Rambam mentions 3 situations in which a person may opt to say the shortened version of the tefillah, that is to say 7 brachot, which includes the middle bracha of Havinenu. First of all, he says if the person is tarud, that is distracted. 2, if a person is dahuk, under pressure, in a great rush, etc. I added that the same would certainly hold true for someone whose mind is not as it normally would be because he's not feeling his best. In other words, he's slightly under the weather. That's also a kind of tirda. And the third option, or the third situation, the Rambam says, is where a person doesn't know the tefillah fully or properly, which means, for example, that a person doesn't have a siddur, and he doesn't know the tefillah as other people might know it, but he does know, he's able to remember by heart the shortened version. Any of these situations is a situation in which a person may choose without any qualms to pray the short version known as Havinenu. Unfortunately, this tefillah of Havinenu today is not very well known, to put it mildly. And the reason for this is actually quite surprising. It's that in some ways one could say that it's the fault, so to speak, of the Talmud Bavli, that the tefillah of Havinenu is hardly used nowadays by almost anybody. And the facts of the matter are as follows. We find it in Gemara, Masechet Berachot, and the Talmud Bavli, Daf Kafteh, Amud Aleph. It says there that one may say Havinenu all year round, except for the following occasions. It says one may not do so during the winter months when one has to ask for rain in Birkat HaShanim. The logic being that in the standard nusach that the Talmud brings, those words referring to asking for rainfall do not appear, and therefore if they don't appear, we don't know what we can do about that exactly. Or that's the implication. How can you get around this problem? There's no official reference, there's no specific reference to asking for rain in that nusach of Havinenu, and therefore you can't say it during those months. That's already half of the year. It goes on to say in the Talmud Bavli that you may say Havinenu all year round, or rather half of the year, but not on Mosai Shabbatot and Mosai Yamim Tovim, not at the end of Shabbat or the end of Yom Tov, because one has to say Havdalah in the tefillah, and again there is no explicit mention of the Havdalah in the nusach of Havinenu. Even though in the Gemara itself it is suggested by one of the Chachamim that there is a very simple way to get around this fact of the lack of an explicit reference, and that is by adding an explicit reference, which only means adding 3 or 4 words, literally. Nevertheless, this suggestion seems not to be accepted. It's not explicitly so, but it seems not to be accepted fully by the Talmud, and the standard approach based on that sugya of the Talmud Bavli and the Geonim of Bavel and the majority of the Rishonim is that one may not say the tefillah of Havinenu. One may not say the condensed version of the tefillah known as Havinenu. During those 6 months of the year when one is supposed to be asking for rain, and those other days of the year, so which in effect we're talking about 60% of the year. And therefore, seeing that for so many days during the year this tefillah of Havinenu is not really an option at all, according to this position, this, it seems, is one of the reasons this tefillah of Havinenu fell out of favor, so to speak, and became a non-issue, and which is in fact most unfortunate, because there are many situations, there are many people who would benefit from and would very much like to know that there is such an option if they were only told about it, but this is something that people do not hear about usually. One could mention a person again who's in a big rush to get to work, to get an appointment, to make a flight, or something like that. One could mention a person who, for whatever reason, didn't daven earlier and the time for his tefillah is about to end. Let's say the sun is about to set, he has 2 minutes till the sun sets. He can say the tefillah of Havinenu in that time, before the sun sets, and still daven mincha, whereas if he says the long version, he won't be able to do so. Another example would be, for example, here in Israel, certainly a soldier on active duty, or policeman, or other kinds of jobs which require a person to be available. It doesn't allow a person to take time off, or he may have a very few moments in which to pray, and not the usual longer period of time that he would normally want. In many of these situations, the tefillah of Havinenu would really be precisely what the doctor ordered. And unfortunately, based on what the Talmud Bavli says, this option has become a non-option. But it is important and necessary to point out that in the Talmud Yerushalmi we do not find these issues. Neither the suggestion that one may not say Havdalah on Musai Shabbat and Musai Yom Tov, and therefore one cannot say Havinenu at those times. That does not appear in the Talmud Yerushalmi at all. What we find, in fact, is the opposite. We find that with regards to asking for rain during the winter months or for dew during the summer months, the Talmud Yerushalmi specifically relates to this issue and says that during the summer months you modify the tefillah of Havinenu by using certain words, and with regards to the winter months you make another slight modification and use a few other words in order to make the tefillah appropriate for the time of year, and the Yerushalmi sees no problem in this. It seems that the attitude of the Talmud Bavli to such matters of nusach tefillah and making slight modifications to the tefillah in order to make it time and place appropriate, etc., was much more rigid, and it's difficult to comprehend, in fact, why it is so, because even the Talmud Bavli itself says that the suggestion that it is possible to make a slight modification to the nusach of Havinenu, and by so doing one is able to ask for rain, she'elat geshamim, during the winter months, and therefore why should it be impossible to say Havinenu during those months? The Talmud itself responds to this suggestion and it says kashya. Kashya means you have a very good point and we haven't got a very good answer, and yet it seems that Talmud Bavli does not fully accept this response. And the same is true with regards to the Havdalah. There's no doubt the Yerushalmi thinks exactly the same thing about the issue of Havdalah al Mosei Shabbat, that one can add in a few words with regards to stating, making the official statement recognizing the fact that now is no longer Shabbat, or Yom Tov is now over. One can do so and still pray Havinenu, and the Yerushalmi is entirely in favor of this. So the tefillah of Havinenu, if we accept the approach of the Talmud Yerushalmi, is a very real option and a very meaningful and important weapon, so to speak, in our armory when it comes to performing the mitzvah of tefillah.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.